Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to draw this beautiful rainbow birthday cake. Isn't it fun and pretty looking? I love the texture and the colors. I'll have a real-time version of this up in Critique Club if you want to check it out, and I will have that linked down below. I also have a brand new marker course, Alcohol Marker Workshop, that is launched this week. If you'd like to check that out, it's on launch special, and you can save 50% on that class with a coupon code MARKER50 or by clicking the discount link in the video description. So you can find all of that down below. This piece, though, is not in the marker class. It's in Critique Club if you're curious. Now, I'm starting off by sketching this slice of cake onto my marker sketchbook. I'm using the Sketch Marker sketchbook. I think it's about 7 by 7, maybe, right around that. I'm trying to count the guidelines on my mat. Maybe it's 6 by 6. It's a fairly small sketchbook. You can see by the size of my hands here. And I'm using that flat compass there to draw my skinny candles there. That thing has been so useful. I bought a pack of those last week and I'm using them all the time. Highly recommend. And another thing I just recently purchased that I am loving are these clear translucent sticky notes. They're a very thin plastic. They have about 1 inch of adhesive on them, and it's a very low tack adhesive. It's more tacky than our standard Post-it note, but it is less tacky than washi tape, so it's perfect for using as a mask. And I put 4 of them together, and I'm just outlining the perimeter of my sketch here. And then I'll just, I taped the pieces of sticky note together so I could lift it all up in one go and cut it out. That way, I don't have to worry about them pulling apart and then trying to piece them back together again. So, you know, there is a bit of overlap there, so I did waste a bit, but I think it's, they're pretty inexpensive, and I could always save this if I wanted to try drawing this again, which is another good thing. It's great for stampers too, because if you make that mask for stamping, you can keep it over and over again, which I do with Post-it notes anyway, but the paper Post-it notes eventually get too saturated with ink and you have to throw them away. But these, I think you just wipe them off because they're plastic. You could use them forever and ever. So just to kind of give you an idea of what's available out there. It's really easy to work with too, because you can cut it with scissors. I think I could use an X-Acto knife if I had thicker paper, but I'm using marker paper here, which is really thin, and I was afraid I would cut through it and damage the paper, so I'm using scissors. But this was really easy to cut out. When I put the sticky notes down, I just made sure that I had adhesive touching perimeter edges of my drawing, so that it would, you know, it would keep all the edges down from like lifting. And my head's in the way there because I had to look straight down on my sketchbook to line it up really well. Now, I wanted to use my airbrush. I haven't used this in a long time, and full disclosure, I actually have 2 airbrushes. This one was one my husband got me a couple of years ago. It was a kit from Amazon. It's very affordable. It's like 40 bucks, and it's still available. I'll link it down below. Because I was really overwhelmed. I hadn't used my good airbrush in years, and honestly, just the cleaning of it and all of the accessories I needed with it, it was just overwhelming, and this is so much easier. But if you don't have an airbrush, you can use a marker spritzer like this one here. This is an old Stampin' Up! One. I know Tim Holtz came out with one recently, so they should be pretty easy to find. You just pop your marker in and give it a squeeze, and you can get a kind of airbrush look. I'm using it to get a little bit more of a mottled background because I wanted a little bit of a more galaxy-looking type thing. But you could also use ink pads and blending brushes. You could use sponges and chalks, or sponges and inks, you know, whatever you want to get that soft background. Once you've done the work of creating the mask, you can really do all kinds of stuff. And I want to flick on some like starry texture, so I just used a toothbrush and white alcohol ink, and there was still some silver watercolor left in that toothbrush, I guess, because it got a little silver looking too. Now, I sprayed alcohol ink on this, and I don't recommend that because I have a feeling that it's not the best thing to inhale, because I was feeling kind of woozy after I did that. So what I would recommend if you're doing this project is to use mixed media paper or Bristol and use watercolor or liquid watercolor inks if you want to airbrush. So do as I say, not as I do, because I care about you and I want you to be healthy. Now, since the background is all dry, which it doesn't take too long with the alcohol ink, it will take longer if you're using watercolor. Just let it dry well. I'm using my Sanjoki markers and a few random ones that I have open stock, and I'm coloring first I'm coloring a band of cake flat with just a flat color, and then I'm dabbing on a slightly darker version of that color, and that's just going to give me that bit of cakey texture. Now, when you do the second layer, your first layer is still wet, so you're going to get a little bit of a softer edge, a little bit more of a blended look. If you let that dry and then do a third layer, then you'll get more of the cake crumb texture. So keep that in mind. If you want your inks to blend, then do them wet and wet. If you want to have more texture, you want to layer them and have crisp edges, you want to let it dry. So just kind of, keep that in mind. And also, marker paper will layer more than like a blending cardstock will. So, you pick the paper for the project you want to do. And I am a serial sketchbook user. I have usually no fewer than 12 sketchbooks in use at any one time. So I just grab whatever sketchbook I think is going to work the best for the piece that I am working on. And I don't know if I necessarily recommend that. I don't recommend it for beginners because it can be a learning curve to have to adapt to new paper every time. But, when you're seasoned, when you've been, using a medium for years, it does not hurt to switch around to different sketchbooks depending on your needs. Plus, it takes a few to figure out exactly what you like. I found out, unfortunately, that I like them all, so I have a lot going at once. The downside is it takes you years to finish a sketchbook because you always have so many that you're working in. This set of markers here, I know I've mentioned it quite a few times and in my gift guide. It's the Sanjoki set of 120, and it's a really wonderful set. I think it's gone up a bit. It's up to like $46 now, but I mean, for less than 50 sets of marker in a nice case with marker paper and a swatch and a protective sheet, I really think it's still a great value. And Christmas is coming. If you've got a kid that is really interested in marker artwork, maybe they want Copics but they're out of your budget, or maybe if you're buying Copics you could only afford 6, but if you're buying this set you can afford 120. It's definitely worth a look. I'm really happy with it. I use Copics as well, but I find the ink quality to be very similar. The nibs are fiber nibs rather than the foam rubber nibs, but they're not the bad fiber nibs. They're not going to go mushy on you right away, and they're reversible. So if a nib does start to get frayed, you flip it around and you got a fresh nib underneath. I really think these are a great value, and I enjoy using them, and I have Copics. So I would just use my Copics with those because I didn't have the color I wanted in the Sanjoki. So I just grabbed my really pale Copic that I wanted. So they all work well together. It's not like you buy one and you can never use the other kind. They all work well together. As long as they're all alcohol based, they're all going to be compatible. So don't let certain marker artists make you drink the Kool-Aid that you have to have a certain brand and that's the only thing that's, worthwhile. That's not true. There's lots of great brands out there. Let your budget and your preference be your guide. I wanted to meld and highlight in the center of these candles a little bit. So I'm using the chisel edge of my clear blender just to kind of give a highlight. Also try to straighten the candles out because they got a little wonky on me as I was coloring. So maybe it was the fumes from spraying alcohol ink prevented me from being able to color in a straight line. I don't know, but they were looking a little too animated there. So trying to straighten them out a little bit. They looked like they'd been in a fire. They were starting to melt. So yeah, I have a few little tips and tricks to kind of push my lines back where I want them. One is to use the chisel edge of a cool gray or blue gray marker and just kind of add my shadow to the edge, trying to draw a line as straight as I can. I didn't want to use a ruler though, because sometimes when you have a ruler with alcohol markers, you go too slow and then the ink pulls up on the edge of the ruler and then it like just whooshes out on the paper. So you end up with a really splotchy feathered line underneath. So that's why I would just want to do it kind of freehand. But freehanding with the chisel edge is easier to get a straight line because the nib is already straight. I'm going in with another layer of my crumb texture just to give it a little bit more, texture basically. Give it those little crisp dots. And I wanted to have some messy clumps of crumbs in like kind of falling down into other colors. I try to look for the flaws when I am drawing food because I think that makes it look more realistic, especially if it's something like a cake or a pastry, because if you draw it too perfect, it looks plastic. You've got to draw it, you've got to put those flaws in there to make it look realistic and yummy. And I'm using a white gel pen to put some highlights here on the candle. Now this is an Arteza white gel pen, which has been working pretty well for me. It's so weird, like I will have a gel pen work great. I'll have a gel pen that never works right, and then I just kind of set it aside, don't think about it until I run out of my favorite gel pen, and I pick it up again, and then it's all of a sudden it's working great. So I don't know. Usually I've never brought back a gel pen from the dead, but this one I don't recall it working great, now it's working great, so I don't know. Uniball Signo Broad is generally my pick for a white gel pen, or I'll use an extra fine white Posca pen, but yeah, if you've got a gel pen that works for you, just keep using it. I also think that climate might play a part. Like if your climate is more humid, certain pens work better. If your climate's more dry, certain pens work better. So I know different times of year, certain pens work differently. So I don't know. I should probably create some sort of spreadsheet or make notes when I notice a pen is working better or working worse. There's just so many variables though. So yeah, I just kind of, if it stops working though, I don't fuss with it. If I have a pen that keeps skipping and doesn't work, I just chuck it. I'm not with a gel pen. I mean, gel pens are notoriously difficult to bring back from the grave. Once they're dried up, they generally won't work well for you. I need to refine some edges. So I'm going to use this, fine liner pen with this little straight edge. Now this is the Tombow Funosuke. Maybe I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I'll link it down below. It's the hard tip one. That's the one I prefer because I think the soft tip is more if you like to do brush lettering. And this is actually a calligraphy pen. It's not a fine liner per se, but I love it for fine lining because I can use it on the edge with little pressure and get a fine line. I can press and use it for a thicker line. I can use it straight up and down for kind of a medium line. And I can go from thin to thick with my lines really expressively, kind of like a paintbrush. So I really like this. You might too, or you might not. I don't know. If you have any issues where you have nerve damage in your hands, I think using a fine liner set that has fixed nib sizes would be more useful. Or if you are unfamiliar with how hard to press, it might be better to have a fixed nib size. But if you're more painterly and you like those expressive lines, I would give one of these a try. They're really fun and they're not very expensive. So, yeah, I mean, what's the harm? I like the hard tip. I bought a set that had a hard tip and a soft tip of the black and then a dual tip that had a black and a gray. And I like all three of those a lot, especially the gray and black one, because I can sketch with the gray marker, do all my coloring, and then fine line with the black one afterwards. So I can kind of get those really light lines for sketching. And then, and it's good under watercolor and under alcohol marker. So since I use both, it's just kind of like a perfect thing. Most of your fine liners are waterproof under watercolor as well as being non-smudge under your alcohol markers, but you know, I always test before I put it into a real painting. And I'm going in, I am doing a little bit of stippling for the cake texture with this, but it's almost making it look like a rubber stamp, and I'm not sure if I really like that look on this illustration. It's starting to look a little cartoony, so I'm kind of on the fence about that. I decided that I was going to pull in some other media just to soften that cartoony look, and I'm going to use some pencils for that. I like to use wax-based pencils for this, but honestly, you can use whatever you like. The reason I prefer to use soft wax-based pencils is because, especially on this really slick marker paper, it's not going to take a lot. So using a softer pencil will just help it lay down. I'm using mostly Prismacolor here. You could use any of your soft pencils, really. The wax-based pencils are a little more opaque, so they do stand up a little bit better over the alcohol marker. But again, if you had polychromos or you had any other brand, it's going to work fine, even if it's oil-based. I mean, heck, you could even use watercolor pencils over top, but they tend not to have that luster that a wax or an oil-based pencil will have. And also, using this on the candles is nice because candles are wax and it actually does give it a bit of that waxy texture. And I'm deepening some shadows with my pencils as well, and kind of toning down some of the ink stippling I did because I thought it looked a little too dark, a little too rough, and even toning down some of the white gel pen stippling I did because I thought it looked a little too rough. I'm using some Artix paint pens. Those are really nice, and I think they're coming out with another 24 colors of the ones that are more gouache, the ones that will reactivate on porous surfaces and even on like watercolor paper. I really like them. They're called acrylic paint pens, but they're really like gouache paint pens. They're coming out with more colors of those, so that's going to be kind of nice. I believe sometime in November. So if you like those and you'd like more colors, you're in luck. And they're also a little bit kind of translucent, so I can layer them up here and not cover up everything that I have underneath, which is what I like about the colored pencils. They're semi-translucent. I can still see what's underneath. It just adds like that extra layer and depth and color that I want. And you can see what you have in your stash and see what you can combine to give nice effects. I want the shadow that the cake was casting to be a little bit darker, so I'm using a cool gray 70% from Prismacolor to just deepen that a little bit. And I'm not like burnishing, I'm just coloring like on its edge so that I get kind of a soft grainy shadow. But because the paper is so smooth, it's not really grainy. Now the horizon line there, I had kind of it at an angle, and I wish I had angled it more, either had it straight or angled it more. It's not angled really drastically enough, I think, because it just kind of looks like it's weird, and I have it at 2 different levels. So I say, so go more dramatic or have it straight, I guess. But anyway, I'm pretty happy with how this is coming out. I like the mixed media effects. I like how my paper is nice and flat. And I think it looks nice. And I hope you enjoyed it too. Remember, this is in Critique Club if you want to see a fully narrated or real-time version of this particular project. And if you'd like to learn more about alcohol markers, please check out my alcohol marker workshop. It's 50% off during the launch special. So make sure you use the coupon code marker50 or use the discount link in the video description if you want to save money on that class. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye.